My name is Jessica Hartley, and I thought I could trust my parents with the one person I love most, my daughter, Emily. But the night they returned from a weekend trip without her, everything I believed about family shattered. They left my 6-year-old child alone in another city as punishment, and they didn't even flinch. Where are you watching this video from? Let me know in the comments below. And if you've ever had to protect your child or stand up to your own family, this story might feel hauntingly familiar. I sat at the edge of the floral print armchair in my parents' kitchen, fingers nervously tapping the armrest, watching the clock inch past 8:40 p.m. The warmth of the old Vermont farmhouse, with its pine floors and hand-stitched curtains, did nothing to settle my heart. They were supposed to be back by 7, with Emily, my daughter, my whole world. The tea kettle hissed softly on the stove. I had it all ready, hot cocoa with extra marshmallows, her favorite blue-striped pajamas folded on the chair, and the stuffed lion she insisted on sleeping with perched beside the cushion. But the door creaked open and only 2 people walked in. My father, Harold, set down his keys like it was any other evening. My mother, Marlene, peeled off her coat and sighed as if she were the one burdened. I stood. "Where's Emily?" My voice came out tight, expectant. Surely she was just asleep in the back seat, or maybe they'd taken her to grab a treat from the town diner. My father didn't even look at me. He walked over to the sink, poured a glass of water, and muttered, "Let her learn some manners." The room shifted. It tilted and spun. "What?" "She was being difficult," he said flatly. "Threw a tantrum in the hotel lobby when we said no to dessert, refused to apologize, so we left her." My throat closed up. "Left her? Where?" "In Albany," he said, like it was a completely reasonable answer. "At the Marriott by the park. She'll figure it out. Maybe next time she'll think twice before screaming at her elders." I didn't remember grabbing the edge of the counter, but my knuckles had gone white. "You left my child, your granddaughter, alone in another city because she wanted dessert." "She wasn't alone," my mother added with a casual flick of her wrist. "There were plenty of people around. Front desk staff, other families. She wasn't exactly in danger." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You left a 6-year-old girl in a hotel lobby 5 hours from home and drove away." I was yelling now. The kind of yell that comes from somewhere under your ribs where panic festers into rage. My mother rolled her eyes. "Don't be dramatic, Jessica. Honestly, the way you've raised that child, it's no wonder she acts entitled." "Entitled?" Because she cried over dessert. I turned to my father, who was now sitting calmly with the local newspaper spread in front of him. "You didn't even call me, not once." He didn't answer, just flipped the page. I slammed my hand down on the table. "She's 6, Dad. She's not a dog you can just abandon to teach a lesson." "What the hell is wrong with you?" The kitchen air crackled. The house that used to smell like cinnamon and safe places now reeked of betrayal. "We're not doing this again," my mother snapped. "You always overreact. You've bobbied that girl from day one. She needs to toughen up." I was shaking. My hands, my legs, my voice. I grabbed my phone, heart pounding so hard I could barely see the screen. 38 missed calls from my daughter, 6 voicemails. The tears came then. Violent, breath-snatching sobs that I hadn't felt since I was a teenager, crying behind this same kitchen table. I looked at the people who raised me and I didn't see parents anymore. I saw strangers. "I'm going to get my daughter," I whispered. "And when I come back," my mother interrupted with a huff. "If you come back just to yell some more, don't bother. Maybe you should think about how your parenting led to this in the first place." That was the last thing she said before I walked out. I didn't even grab my coat. I just left, because Emily was alone in Albany, and I had 5 hours to fix what they broke. The road between Vermont and Albany was slick with patches of black ice, the kind you only see when it's too late. I had one hand on the wheel and the other gripping my phone like it was a lifeline, even though there was no one left to call who hadn't already failed me. I don't remember much of that drive except the sound of my own voice, screaming, whispering, praying. The highway blurred. Every headlight felt like a threat. Every hour that passed without hearing Emily's voice twisted my stomach tighter. I left voicemails for every Albany police precinct I could find. I called the Marriott twice. The front desk woman was kind, but she said Emily hadn't been there when the night staff came on. No sign of a little girl in pink sneakers and a unicorn hoodie. I nearly pulled over and threw up. My mother once told me I was too sensitive for motherhood, that I coddled Emily too much. But in that moment, barreling down the interstate at 2:00 a.m., all I wanted was to wrap that little girl in my arms and coddle her forever. At a gas station outside Shroon Lake, I slumped in the front seat with the engine idling, too panicked to even pee. My hands trembled as I redialed another number, Albany Police, Station 4. On the third ring, someone picked up. "Ma'am," the dispatcher said, "can you confirm the child's name?" I gave it again. Emily Hartley, 6 years old, missing since that afternoon, left by her grandparents. I couldn't keep my voice steady. There was a pause. "We may have her here." My heart seized. "What? Are you sure?" "She's safe, calm. She told us her mom taught her to find a uniform if she got lost. She asked the hotel to call the police. Officer Ramirez brought her here around 6:15 p.m. She's been waiting." She's been waiting. I sobbed into the phone. The dispatcher gave me the address and promised someone would be there to let me in, even at this hour. 2 more hours. My foot pressed hard on the gas the rest of the way. It was nearly dawn when I pulled into the parking lot of the station. The sky had turned that color between deep blue and steel gray, the kind that only shows up in winter. I didn't even shut the door behind me when I ran in. A tired-looking officer met me in the lobby. "You Jessica Hartley?" I nodded, breathless, tears already spilling. "Where is she?" The door to the side hallway opened. And there she was, Emily. Her tiny legs swung from the seat in the waiting area, holding a juice box like she owned the place. Her hair was mussed, but her face lit up the second she saw me. "Mommy!" She ran into my arms so fast I nearly lost my balance. I dropped to my knees and hugged her so tight I could feel her heartbeat against mine. My sobs came out in gasps. I kissed the top of her head again and again, whispering, "I'm so sorry. I'm here now. I'm here." She pulled back and touched my face with one hand. "I remembered what you said about strangers in uniforms. I didn't talk to anyone unless they had a badge or a name tag, and I stayed inside where it was warm." I could barely breathe. "You did everything right, baby, everything." "I wasn't scared," she said proudly. "I knew you'd come." My knees buckled, but I smiled through the tears. An officer brought over her tiny suitcase, still zipped and untouched. I signed the necessary forms with shaking hands. They gave me a brief report and said they'd need to follow up about the circumstances. I nodded. I'd deal with all of it later. For now, I just needed to take my daughter home. Back at the car, Emily curled into the blanket I kept in the back seat. As I buckled her in, she asked, "Mommy, are Grandma and Grandpa mad at me?" I hesitated. "They made a very bad decision, but it's not your fault." She nodded quietly and looked out the window. As I pulled onto the road, her voice piped up again. "Can we play that song, the one with the dancing frogs?" I reached for the stereo, trying to smile. "Of course we can." But inside, I was already unraveling. The relief of having her safe mixed with a guilt that cut deep. I had trusted them. I had let her go with them, never again. The house was too quiet when we returned. I unlocked the door with Emily perched on my hip, her cheek resting against my shoulder. She was half asleep, her thumb tucked near her mouth like she used to do when she was a toddler. My arms were tired, my spine ached, but I didn't dare put her down until we crossed the threshold. I didn't want her feet touching this floor until I had checked every room myself. My parents weren't home. Their car wasn't in the driveway either, which gave me time to breathe, to clean, to gather the pieces of myself I'd scattered all over Vermont and New York. "Let's make a fort," Emily mumbled as I carried her into the living room. "You got it," I whispered. But first, soup. I tucked her on the couch with her lion and the soft throw blanket she always reached for, then crept into the kitchen. The kettle was still on the stove. I moved it to the back burner, then washed my hands 3 times before starting anything. I didn't want a single trace of them on what I was about to make. Carrot and potato, her favorite. Extra butter a little time. Cooking always settled me. The slicing, the stirring, the heat, things I could control. Not like my parents, who made decisions like gods and left other people to deal with the fallout. I kept glancing toward the living room to make sure Emily was still there, still breathing, still real. Every 10 seconds I had to remind myself that she was safe now. She had made it through something no child should have had to navigate. And still, She smiled when I brought her the soup, sat upright, said thank you like she always did. I was the one who could barely swallow my own spoonful. After lunch, I tucked her into bed and sat beside her until she fell asleep. Her lion curled in her arms, her breathing soft and steady. My little girl, abandoned and yet somehow more whole than the people who left her behind. I walked out of her room and shut the door gently, then stood in the hallway, unsure what to do with my hands. Everything looked normal. The family photos in the hall. The crooked candlestick my mom always promised to fix. The worn edge of the rug we all tripped over but never moved. But something was different now. I was different now. The ache in my chest hadn't faded. If anything, it had calcified into something harder, sharper. A decision was forming in me, quiet and certain. I went back to the kitchen and began gathering things, papers, text messages, receipts from Albany. I found the officer's business card and slid it into a drawer I never used. I didn't know exactly what I'd do with this information yet, but I knew I'd need it. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was awake. By the time my parents' car returned, the sun had dipped low, casting the living room in a golden light that felt too warm for what was about to happen. I sat in the armchair, legs crossed, hands still. Waiting, my mother walked in first. "Back already?" she asked, setting her purse down without even looking at me. "I have Emily," I said flatly. My father followed behind, glancing around the room like he expected the furniture to have shifted in their absence. "Good," he said. "She'll think twice next time." I stood up. She didn't need to think twice. She needed adults who wouldn't abandon her in a strange city. My mother rolled her eyes, a gesture so practiced it felt like punctuation. "Jessica, she's not made of glass. You overreact to everything." "She was alone in Albany," I said slowly. "She had to find a police officer to get help." "She did, didn't she?" my father said, shrugging as he reached for the newspaper. "Smart girl." My stomach churned. Before I could say more, a small voice carried from the hallway. "Mommy, Emily." She patted in, blinking against the light, her hair mussed from sleep. She looked at them, her grandparents, then back at me. "I heard yelling," she whispered. I knelt down and opened my arms. She ran straight into them. "You're not in trouble," I said gently. "You're safe." She looked up at my parents. "I don't want to go with them anymore." The silence that followed was deafening. Even my father lowered his paper. "I don't want them to watch me again," she said. "They made me feel gone." Her words were so small, so final. My mother cleared her throat. "She doesn't mean that." "I do," Emily said, pressing her face into my shoulder. And in that moment I saw the shift. The power sliding away from them, not with rage or confrontation, but with a child's quiet clarity. I didn't have to scream, she had already spoken. I didn't sleep that night. Not because Emily stirred, she slept like the dead, but because I couldn't stop turning it all over in my head. Her voice, so small, so sure, they made me feel gone. It echoed through the quiet dark like a bell I couldn't unring. I lay on the floor beside her bed, one hand resting gently on the edge of her mattress, as if she might disappear again if I didn't keep her tethered to me. By morning, I had made a decision. I wasn't going to wait for an apology. I wasn't going to waste another breath explaining why what they did was unforgivable. I had done that dance too many times before, pleading, justifying, hoping they'd hear me. No more. That morning, I brewed coffee in silence while my parents moved through the house like nothing had happened. My mother hummed as she arranged flowers in a chipped porcelain vase. My father stood at the window, talking about how the squirrels had gotten into the bird feeder again. I didn't respond. I was done pretending. Later, while Emily colored at the kitchen table with her lion tucked under her arm, I opened my laptop and began searching for apartments in Burlington. I had always dreamed of living there, close to the lake, walkable neighborhoods, a decent school district. It had felt out of reach before, but now it felt like oxygen. I wasn't looking for luxury. I just wanted peace. It took a week. I worked late at my remote tech job every night, saving every penny. I sold a few things online. I found a modest 2-bedroom with creaky floors, a crooked hallway closet, and a view of someone else's fire escape, but it was ours. The first night we walked in with keys of our own, Emily spun in a circle in the empty living room and squealed. "It smells like pancakes." It smells like freedom, I told her, trying not to cry. We slept on an air mattress that night. I wrapped her in the quilt my grandmother had sewn for me when I was 12. The radiator hissed and clanked like it was clearing its throat, and I couldn't have cared less. No one here would call my daughter spoiled. No one here would teach her a lesson by abandoning her. We were free. The next morning, I cleared off a little corner of the living room to set up my desk, just a folding table and my laptop. But it felt like building a future. I taped up Emily's drawing of a sun with legs and labeled it happy in crayon letters above my monitor. She beamed when she saw it displayed. "Your office is cute, Mommy," she said, skipping away with her toast. It didn't take long for her to turn into my little helper. She insisted on folding dish towels, lining up her stuffed animals on the couch, and supervising while I assembled cheap shelves with an Allen wrench and too much swearing under my breath. I caught her watching me one afternoon while I was scrubbing paint off a second-hand dining chair. "What?" I asked. She tilted her head. "You look different." "Different how?" "Like lighter," she said, twirling one of her curls around a finger. "Like you're not carrying something heavy anymore." I blinked at her. "Getting very wise for 6. She nodded solemnly. "I read books now." We both burst out laughing. We ate grilled cheese on paper plates that night and made up stories about the neighbors we could see through the windows across the street. She named them all: Mr. Toast, Lady Fluffy Pants, and the man who forgets his keys. We were safe. We were laughing. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't just surviving, I was rebuilding. One evening, I opened an email from Human Resources at work. They offered to upgrade my contract to full-time remote with a small pay raise and a monthly tech stipend. I cried when I read it. It felt like the universe whispering, "Keep going." I didn't tell my parents we had moved. They didn't ask. But a week later, I got a call. A woman's voice on the other end, formal, clipped, official. "Ms. Hartley, this is Deborah Langston from Vermont Child and Family Services. I'd like to schedule a home visit." My blood went cold. "There's been a report," she continued, "that your daughter was recently found alone and we've been asked to verify her safety." I sat down hard. "A report? Who reported that?" "I can't disclose the source," she said gently. "But based on the details, I think you already know." My parents, of course. She arrived on a Tuesday. A pale gray sedan pulled up at exactly 10:02 a.m. A woman in her 50s stepped out, carrying a slim black folder and a leather tote. She wore flats and a navy blazer and moved with the calm assurance of someone who had seen everything and was rarely surprised anymore. I opened the door before she could knock. "Ms. Hartley?" she asked. "Yes, please come in." Her name was Deborah Langston. She smiled politely as she stepped inside and scanned the apartment, subtly, the way people do when they're trained not to make you feel judged. But of course I felt judged. That was the whole point of this visit. Emily was still at school. I had asked if she needed to be home, but Deborah had said, "No, this is more of a check-in with you for now." I offered her tea. She declined. I sat on the edge of the couch while she took the only armchair in the room, crossing one leg over the other and flipping open her folder. "The report stated that your daughter was found alone in Albany," she began. "Unsupervised. Can you walk me through what happened?" I took a breath. "I wasn't there," I said. "She was with my parents, her grandparents. They took her for a weekend trip and left her alone at a hotel as punishment." Deborah's pen stopped moving. "They left her?" she asked carefully. "Yes, on purpose. My father told me they wanted her to learn some manners. He admitted it when they came back without her." Her eyes lifted from the page. "How old is Emily?" 6. "And how did she get help?" "She did exactly what I taught her," I said, my voice catching. "She found a hotel employee, asked them to call the police. She was taken to a station. I drove all night to get her." I pulled out the documentation I'd prepared, the police report, the names of the officers, the hotel's front desk contact. Deborah reviewed each paper in silence, her eyes narrowing only slightly. When she spoke again, her voice was gentler. "This changes the context significantly." "I know how it sounds," I said. "But please understand, I didn't endanger her. I rescued her." And I moved us out the moment I realized my parents were still trying to minimize what they'd done. "You're no longer living with them?" "No, we moved here a few weeks ago. I have full custody. There's no joint guardianship. They were never legally assigned as caretakers, just family. I trusted them." She nodded slowly, flipping a page. Do you know who filed the report? I have a guess. She closed the folder softly. I can't confirm that, but I can say that it didn't come from the hotel or the Albany police, and it was submitted 2 weeks after the incident. I looked at her. 2 weeks? Yes, a gap like that often suggests intent. Someone wanted us to take action, not because a child was in danger, but because they wanted to cause you trouble. That was it. The final confirmation I hadn't even realized I needed. They weren't sorry. They were retaliating. I can assure you, Deborah continued, your daughter is not under investigation. This is purely a safety verification. And what happens now? I asked. I'll file this report as resolved, no risk. She stood. But may I offer you a small piece of advice? I nodded. People like this, they don't just stop. If they feel they're losing control, they escalate. So I would advise keeping records, save everything. If you need to, file a formal no-contact order. It's not dramatic, it's protection. I didn't realize I was gripping my own knees until she gently touched my shoulder and added, You're doing a good job. Better than most, honestly. After she left, I sat in the armchair and stared at the closed door. Her words circled my head like a chant. They don't just stop. I thought about every time my mother had called me emotional. Every time my father pretended not to hear. Every family dinner where my voice was talked over, then folded into silence. This wasn't over. But now I wasn't playing defense anymore. That night, I watched Emily sleep with the same vow in my heart I'd made the night I held her in that Albany police station. You are never going to be used as a pawn again. Not by anyone. Not even by people who share our blood. And neither am I started with a shoebox. A plain cardboard box from Emily's new sneakers, the kind that still smelled faintly of rubber and glue. I emptied it on the kitchen table and began to sort. Receipts, printed emails, text screenshots, everything I could remember that tied together the story they'd tried to erase. The gas station charge on my credit card at 3:12 a.m. the night I drove to Albany. The Marriott confirmation for the room my parents booked, 2 adults, no children. The officer's card from Albany PD. The handwritten note from Emily's teacher, praising her bravery when she told the class about the night I had to be the hero. Every piece of paper whispered the same thing. You're not crazy. You're not overreacting. This happened. I scanned and saved digital copies, created folders, labeled everything. By the time I finished, it was nearly midnight. The only light came from my laptop's screen, the glow catching on the framed drawing Emily had taped to the fridge, a blue sky and 2 stick figures holding hands. Us. The next morning, after dropping Emily at school, I sat down and opened a blank document. I'd written 1,000 things in my head over the last few weeks. Sarcastic rebuttals, long, bleeding monologues about how they failed me. But what poured out now wasn't rage. It was clarity. Dear Mom and Dad, I'm not writing to convince you. I finally accepted that you believe what you believe. That somehow abandoning your granddaughter in another city was a justified lesson, and that reporting me to Child and Family Services was fair retaliation. This letter isn't about changing your mind. It's about setting a boundary you can't ignore. I'm done. You will not see Emily again. You will not be part of her life, school, birthdays, holidays, none of it. You do not get to rewrite the story to make yourselves the victims. I have every record, every receipt, every admission. You're lucky the only thing I'm sending you is this letter and not a subpoena. Do not call, do not show up. Do not send gifts wrapped in guilt or apologies laced with conditions. Emily deserves safety, and I deserve peace. This isn't punishment, it's protection. Goodbye. Jessica. I printed it, folded it, and slid it into an envelope with a return address I no longer lived at. Then I sent it by certified mail. For good measure, I also emailed a scanned copy to both of them. Read receipt, confirmed. And then silence, not a single reply, not even a passive-aggressive one-liner from my mother, which honestly said everything. They weren't shocked. They weren't even sorry. They were simply regrouping. But I wasn't afraid of their silence anymore. That weekend, Emily and I made pancakes for dinner and watched a movie on the floor under a blanket fort. She told me she wanted to be a mommy who works on computers and fights bad guys. You already are, I said, kissing her forehead. Later that night, after she fell asleep, I looked around our apartment and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Stillness. No tightrope. No explosions waiting behind a raised eyebrow. No emotional whiplash from trying to love people who only loved me conditionally. I whispered into the quiet like a promise, "You're safe now. We both are." And I meant it. It started with a text from my cousin Brielle. "Hey, did something happen between you and your parents? Aunt Marlene was saying some weird stuff at dinner last night." I stared at the message for a long time before typing back a careful response. "Define weird," Brielle answered almost immediately. "She said you've been unstable lately, that you moved out without telling anyone, and that Emily's acting out. Uncle Harold said you've been spreading lies about them, and that they're worried about your state of mind." It didn't sound right. It wasn't just wrong. It was calculated. They were seeding the narrative. A quiet smear campaign, just loud enough to be overheard at a family dinner but vague enough to avoid confrontation. The kind of lies that grow roots when people are too polite or too cowardly to ask questions. I closed my eyes and leaned back against the couch. It shouldn't have surprised me. Deborah had warned me. They don't just stop. But still, something about hearing it had actually begun hit differently. My parents weren't just angry. I could have handled that. They were strategic. And Emily, my God, she was 6. What kind of people frame their own granddaughter as troubled to deflect from what they did? I texted Brielle again. "Thank you for telling me. None of that is true. I've got police reports and documentation if anyone actually wants the truth." She responded with a single line that gave me a sliver of hope. "I believe you. If anyone wants receipts, send them my way." Later that night, I pulled out the folder from the shoebox, now organized and color-coded, of course, and added a fresh section. Rumors and family comments. Just in case this got worse. 2 days later, my Aunt Karen called and left a voicemail. "Jessica, honey, I don't know what's going on between you and your folks, but I think you should know they're really hurt. We all are. Family dinners just aren't the same without you. And Emily, of course. Maybe it's time to talk." The message was sugary on the surface but sour underneath. The same subtle guilt they always laced through their voices when I stepped out of line. I didn't respond. And then more silence. Until my coworker Melanie pulled me aside during a Zoom meeting. "Hey, your name came up this weekend. My husband's brother is married to your cousin, Jenna." I blinked. "Oh, she said there's drama happening with your parents, something about you having a breakdown." My stomach turned. "No breakdown," I said calmly. "Just boundaries." Melanie paused. "Well, for what it's worth, Jenna said your mom was telling everyone you're lashing out. But she also said it didn't sound like you. She remembered how you organized that fundraiser for your sister's hospital bills last year, said you were always the one who held the family together." That hit like a gut punch. I had always been the one to hold things together, quietly, without thanks, without question. Now I was holding something else, the line. That night, Emily curled up beside me on the couch, watching a cartoon while I stared blankly at my phone. Her hand slid into mine, warm and soft and impossibly small. "Why are you sad, Mommy?" "I'm not sad," I said, "just thinking." "About mean people." A pause. "Yes. I think maybe mean people get louder when they know they're wrong," she whispered. I smiled, blinking back tears. "Yeah, baby, I think you're right." She fell asleep on my lap, and I sat there for a long time in the quiet, heart beating steady beneath her weight. Let them whisper. Let them twist the truth. I had the real story, and I was done hiding it. I don't know what possessed me to say yes. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was the way Emily had said, louder means wrong. Maybe it was the quiet fury that builds when you've watched people lie about you while you're too busy surviving to fight back. But when my cousin Jenna called and said, "We're having another family dinner. You should come. You deserve to be heard," I said, "I'll be there." The moment I hung up, I felt it. That ripple of dread. Walking into their territory was like stepping into a trap I could already smell, but I couldn't keep avoiding them. I was tired of being the silent scandal. I wanted them to see my face when I didn't flinch. So I pulled on a clean blouse, the one Emily called my fierce mom shirt, and told her I'd be back by bedtime. Maya, my one local friend who had seen me through every crisis, offered to stay with her. "Don't let them drag you into their version of the story," she warned. "Tell the truth. And don't blink first. When I arrived at my aunt's house in Rutland, the dinner was already in motion. Same floral tablecloth as always. Same casserole dishes passed around like peace offerings. Same hierarchy of who sits near the roast chicken and who gets stuck by the fridge. But this time, I was the story. Conversations dulled to murmurs when I stepped inside. Faces flicked toward me with a mix of curiosity, pity, and that sharp, skeptical squint people get when they've already heard too many sides of a story and don't know which one to believe. And then I saw them. My mother, seated at the end of the table in a pale blue sweater, looking fragile in a way she never was. My father next to her, posture straight, hands folded. They smiled, too wide, too sweet. "Jessica," my mother said, her voice honeyed in public, "we're so glad you could make it." I could feel the pressure in the room shift as everyone waited to see what I'd do. I nodded once. "Thank you." The meal was excruciating. They asked about Emily, about my job, my apartment. Every word wrapped in condescension so delicate it would have sounded rude to call it out. My mother complimented my blouse. My father made a joke about tough love being misunderstood these days. Everyone laughed. Except me. I waited. I smiled politely. I watched their act unfold with the precision of a Broadway rehearsal. And then it came. "Well," my mother said, setting down her fork with a dainty sigh, "I just think it's unfortunate how things have been twisted lately. But some people need to blame others to avoid accountability." My gaze sharpened. "Are you saying I'm avoiding accountability for what you did?" I asked, loud enough for the table to still. A hush spread. My mother's eyes widened in faux confusion. "Jessica, sweetie, we've been trying to understand your choices. You moved Emily out suddenly, stopped speaking to us, told people we endangered her. It's just hurtful. You left a 6-year-old alone in another city." "That's not how it happened," my father cut in smoothly. "We gave her a moment to cool off. We were right outside." "No," I said, shaking my head. "You drove away. I have the hotel record, the police report." "You're making a scene," he hissed. I stood to speak, to open the folder I'd brought, but then my Uncle Ted, the loudest supporter of family order, leaned forward. "I don't know what's gotten into you, Jessica," he said, "but you're not the only one with a child to worry about. You've always been difficult. We tried to include you. You chose drama." I froze. I hadn't expected him to jump in. Not him. But there it was, that dangerous moment. The tide turning in their favor. My parents sitting back now, letting others do the talking, letting the whispers work. "I didn't choose drama," I said, my voice tight. "I chose safety." My father chuckled softly. "Sometimes people create chaos so they can feel like heroes." I opened my mouth and nothing came out. For a heartbeat, I feared they'd win. I could have shouted. I could have thrown the folder across the table, screamed every word I'd been holding back, told them what it really felt like to raise a child while unlearning your own childhood. But I didn't. Instead, I reached down, unzipped my tote bag, and pulled out a neat blue folder. No dramatics, no performance, just facts. "I didn't come here to argue," I said, voice even. "I came to clarify." The chatter at the table stopped cold. I handed the first few copies down to my cousin Jenna. "You can pass these around if you'd like." She blinked, unsure, then began sliding them across the table, page by page, copy by copy. My hands didn't shake this time. Inside, the police report from Albany. Officer Ramirez's name, time-stamped and official. The Child and Family Services letter, clearly stating no findings of negligence or risk. Screenshots of my parents' texts, one where my father actually wrote, "Maybe next time she'll say please." And one more page, an email to me from the Marriott front desk, confirming my daughter was not with an adult when they arrived for check-in. No exaggerations, no accusations, just truth on paper. Across the table, Jenna's eyes scanned the first page. She stopped reading. Then very quietly she read aloud. "Child located alone in Albany Marriott lobby. Mother not present. Child stated she was left behind intentionally by grandparents Harold and Marlene Hartley." A pin drop pause. Someone gasped. I didn't look at my parents. I looked at the others. At my Aunt Karen, eyes wide. At Cousin Brielle, mouth open. At Uncle Ted, suddenly very interested in his water glass. I spoke gently but clearly. "I didn't move out because I'm unstable. I moved out because my daughter told me she didn't want to feel invisible anymore, because I chose to listen to her." My mother's chair creaked as she leaned forward. "Jessica, this is outrageous." "No," I said, cutting her off without raising my voice. "What's outrageous is leaving a 6-year-old child in a hotel lobby and then reporting me as unstable when I protected her. What's outrageous is weaponizing family dinners to spin lies you knew no one would question." My father spoke, his tone colder now. "You're overreacting. No one's trying to spin anything." I turned to Uncle Ted. "You called me difficult. Do you still think I'm difficult? Or do you think maybe, just maybe, I was surviving something that none of you ever bothered to look at closely?" He looked down. My mother tried again. "You've always been emotional. You're not thinking clearly." Jenna stood up. "No, she's thinking more clearly than all of us. Why didn't anyone stop and ask what happened? We just took your word for it." My mom went pale. "You said Emily was acting out," Jenna added, voice rising now. "You told everyone she was unstable. She's 6. She did exactly what she was taught to do. She asked for help." I sat down then, not because I was defeated, but because I didn't have to defend myself anymore. The evidence spoke louder than their lies. Around the table, heads began turning. Quiet muttering spread like ripples. My cousin Mason shook his head. "Man, if this had been my kid." My Aunt Karen wiped her mouth, folded her napkin, and said nothing. But her silence this time sounded like shame. No one looked at my parents. Not even Uncle Ted. My mother stood suddenly, flustered. "Well, I suppose this is what happens when people air private matters like courtroom dramas." "No," I said. "This is what happens when you underestimate how long someone will stay quiet before they finally speak." They left without another word. And no one stopped them. Not the morning after. Not before coffee. Not with Emily still curled in bed, her lion tucked under her arm and the city barely waking up outside our window. But there it was, 3 soft raps. I looked through the peephole and felt my chest tighten. Megan, my sister. The last time we'd spoken face to face, it ended in an argument about giving Mom the benefit of the doubt. That was 2 years ago. Since then, we drifted into that awkward, text-on-birthdays sort of silence that pretends it's peace. She held a paper bag of muffins like a peace offering. I opened the door. "I brought lemon poppy seed," she said, shrugging. "You remembered." She stepped inside slowly, glancing around. "This place is nice, cozy." "It's not big," I said, "but it's safe." She nodded once, then looked at me, really looked. "I heard what happened at dinner." Of course she had. "Let me guess," I said, walking into the kitchen. "Mom called you and said I staged a coup." "No," Megan said. "Brielle did, and then Jenna texted, and then Karen, and then Uncle Ted, if you can believe it." I paused mid-reach for a mug. "Ted." He said, and I quote, "Jessica came in like a lawyer and dismantled everyone with a smile." That almost made me laugh, almost. Megan sat at the kitchen table, eyes softening. "I wanted to say I'm sorry for not believing you sooner, for not asking questions. I think deep down I always knew something was off with them, but I was afraid. You and me both." She traced the rim of her coffee cup. "You remember how they used to say I was the reasonable one, the easy daughter?" "Yeah. I wasn't easy, I was just quiet, because if I spoke up they turned cold and I couldn't handle that." I sat down across from her. "You were surviving." Her eyes brimmed, but she blinked fast. "When Emily said she didn't want to see them again, it hit me, like something cracked open. I remember being that age and begging Mom not to make me stay overnight when I cried. She told me I was being dramatic." "I remember that night," I whispered. "You wet the bed and she made you wash your own sheets." Megan nodded, eyes distant. "That was the first time I realized love had conditions in our house." For a while we just sat there, not sisters in a kitchen, but 2 women rebuilding a language we were never taught truth. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a postcard. "Next month's reunion in Manchester. Extended family. Everyone's invited, including them." I took the postcard, reading the neat handwriting on the back. "Family picnic, potluck, games, no drama promised but heavily implied." "They'll be there," Megan said, "but so will everyone else. People are talking, Jess, about what you said, what you showed. They believe you now, or at least they're not so quick to believe them." I stared at the card. "I don't know if I want to go." She placed her hand over mine. "I think you do, not for revenge, but because this time you won't be standing alone. This time the truth has legs." I looked at the crayon drawing Emily had pinned to the fridge. The 2 stick figures, blue sky, no shadows. You think it'll matter? I asked. I think it already does. When she left, I stood at the window for a long time, the postcard resting against my chest. A picnic wasn't justice, but it was a stage. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop surviving and start claiming what was mine. The picnic table was covered in gingham and gilt. Cousin Mason was setting up the speakers. Aunt Karen had brought her famous lemon bars. Kids ran circles around the folding chairs while someone tried to light a stubborn charcoal grill. It looked like any other summer reunion. Except this time it was mine. I spotted them instantly. My parents, standing by the drinks table as if nothing had changed. My father wore his friendly patriarch polo and my mother's sweater was draped just so over her shoulders, her perfect armor. They looked relaxed, smiling, polished, performing. But something had shifted in the crowd. People glanced at them, then at me. Conversations dropped to whispers. You could feel the air holding its breath. I'd brought the folder again, but not to defend myself. This time it was a reminder. I didn't come to beg anyone to believe me. I came to speak. Megan took the mic first. Just a casual welcome, thank you for coming, hope you brought sunscreen, sign up for 3-legged races by noon. But as she spoke, her eyes found mine. A nod. A silent cue. She handed me the mic. And just like that, I was standing in front of 30 people who'd known me since I was in pigtails. People who'd seen me dance at weddings, cry at funerals, pass the potato salad year after year without ever really knowing what it had cost me. I didn't need a script. The words were already in my bones. I know this isn't what you expected, I began, but I need to say something. And not for attention, not for drama, for truth. A few people shifted. My mother's smile tightened. Most of you have heard by now that there's been tension between me and my parents. Some of you have heard stories about why I moved out, why Emily and I don't come around anymore. I'm here to tell you what actually happened. I held up the folder. There's documentation if you need it, police reports, a visit from child services. All because my parents left my 6-year-old daughter alone in a hotel lobby in Albany as punishment. Gasps, audible, real. My father took a step forward. Jessica, this is not the— No. I lifted my hand, calm but firm. You've spoken for me my entire life. This time I speak for myself. He stopped. I looked at the crowd again. My daughter had to find a police officer to keep herself safe. I drove 5 hours through the night to get to her. And when I got her home, she told me without crying, without drama, they made me feel gone. Karen covered her mouth. Someone else whispered, "Oh my God." I moved out. I started over. Not to hurt them, but to protect her, to protect me. And then they reported me, tried to make it look like I was unfit. When that didn't work, they started spreading stories that I'm unstable, that Emily's out of control, that I broke up the family. I took a deep breath. Well, here's the truth. If protecting my child breaks your definition of family, then maybe it was already broken. The silence was thick, charged. My mother finally stepped forward, her voice shaking, not from sadness, but fury held back by teeth. Jessica, this is cruel. You're embarrassing us. I looked her dead in the eye. You embarrassed yourselves the moment you decided a child needed to be taught a lesson with fear and abandonment. This isn't about me. This is about you not getting away with it anymore. And then, out of nowhere, Uncle Ted stood. I believed them, he said. I did, because I couldn't imagine it being true. But now, I don't know what to believe, except that you wouldn't stand here and say all this unless it mattered. My father shook his head. You're being manipulated. No, I said. I'm being free. More murmurs, heads turning. Some people walked away from my parents, others just stared, but no one stood with them. For the first time, they looked small. My mother's eyes darted, looking for rescue. My father's mouth twitched, but no words came. You don't have to like me, I said quietly. But you'll never lie about me again. I handed the mic back to Megan and walked off the stage. No applause, no fanfare, just truth hanging heavy in the summer air, and for once it wasn't mine to carry alone. The voicemail came a week later. I saw the number first, still saved in my phone, still labeled Dad, and for a moment I just stared. I didn't pick up. I wasn't ready to hear his voice live. But when the alert buzzed for a new message, I sat on the edge of my bed, braced myself, and pressed play. Jess, hey, it's Dad, just wanted to, I guess, reach out. A pause. We've had some time to think. Maybe things got out of hand. I don't know what you want from us, but I'd like to talk. Your mother and I were going through a lot right now. Power's been out for 2 days, bills piling up, just wondering if you might be able to lend a hand. I let the silence run its course. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just a thin veil of struggle and a desperate hope that I might step into my old role, fixer, daughter, emotional cleanup crew. I pressed delete. Later that day, I got a text from my mother. "We're outside, just want to talk." No warning, no respect. Just entitlement in the form of showing up uninvited. Emily was coloring at the kitchen table, humming softly. I looked out the window and saw them, standing awkwardly by the curb, my father with his hands shoved deep in his pockets, my mother holding a reusable grocery bag like it was a peace treaty. Emily spotted them too. She stood slowly. "Is that—" "Yeah," I said softly. She looked up at me, uncertain. I crouched to her level. "Do you want to say anything to them?" She shook her head. "Do you want me to?" A small nod. I squeezed her hand. "You don't have to be polite to people who make you feel unsafe." Emily pressed herself against my leg and whispered, "I remember how it felt." That was all I needed. I walked to the door, cracked it open just enough, and stepped out. My mother brightened instantly. "Jessica, no." My voice wasn't loud, but it cut like glass. My father stepped forward. "We just thought—" "No," I repeated, firmer now. "You thought you could ignore what happened until I softened. You thought the storm would pass. And now that you need something, you think I'll come running." He opened his mouth. "I listened to your voicemail," I said. "Here's my response." I took a breath. "If you want anything from me, anything at all, you start with an apology, not to me, to Emily." They blinked. "She's 6, and she still remembers the moment she realized her grandparents didn't care if she felt safe. You want to be part of her life again. You look her in the eyes and tell her the truth." They both looked stunned, as if I'd changed the locks on a house they believed they still owned. "And even then," I added, "that doesn't mean you get a second chance, it just means you've stopped lying." I stepped back. "Jessica," my mother whispered, eyes pleading. I held up my hand. "Goodbye." The door shut quietly behind me. Emily was still by the table, her markers lined up in a perfect rainbow. She looked at me, searching. "Are they gone?" I nodded. "They won't come back unless we want them to." She smiled just a little. "Good." That night, we made grilled cheese and danced in the living room in our socks. She picked the playlist. I let her stay up late. We laughed so hard we both got hiccups. And when she curled up in bed beside me, she whispered, "Thank you for protecting me." I kissed her forehead. "Always." 1 year later, the walls of our new apartment are painted light honey. The sunlight hits just right in the mornings, casting soft golden beams over the hardwood floor where Emily likes to dance while brushing her teeth. It's a second-floor unit in a quiet part of Burlington, close to a park, a library, and a little cafe where the barista knows my name and always adds cinnamon without asking. It's not fancy, but it feels like ours in a way nothing else ever has. We hung Emily's painting above the couch the day we moved in. 2 stick figures, a blue sky, their hands touching in the middle like they were drawing safety from each other. She added a small sun in the corner and said, "That's because we're never in the dark now." I stood there for a long time, looking at it before she tugged my hand and said, "Come sit with me, Mommy." So we did. Every now and then I still get the occasional message from extended family, soft check-ins from the ones who stayed silent too long. Most don't ask questions anymore. They just send updates, a photo, a forwarded meme. Like they're saying, "I see you now," in the only way they know how. I don't press them. I've learned not all relationships are meant to be repaired. Some are only meant to teach us how strong we had to be to survive them. As for my parents, there's been nothing. No apology to Emily. No letters. No more unannounced visits. I think finally they realized I meant what I said. I still have the folder tucked neatly in my filing cabinet. Not out of vengeance, but in case Emily ever needs to understand why. Why her life looks different. Why some people disappeared from birthdays and holidays. Why I didn't let love become a loophole for harm. We talk about it sometimes, when she brings up memories, when the questions bubble up in her small but growing heart, and I always answer the same way. You deserve to feel safe. You deserved better than what they gave. She doesn't ask for details anymore. I think she understands in that quiet, instinctive way children do that love isn't proved by words. It's proved by who shows up when it matters, who stays, who listens. Tonight, we made spaghetti. Helped stir the sauce, proudly adding the green flakes, Aka Basil, and set the table with her plastic butterfly cups. After dinner, she curled up beside me on the couch. "Do you think people can change?" she asked. I looked at her. "I think people can choose to, but not everyone does." She nodded, thoughtful. "I'm glad you chose to protect me." Tears burned at the corners of my eyes. "I'm glad you remembered what I taught you. That day in Albany, you were so brave." She smiled. "I wasn't scared. I was just following the rules." I laughed, hugging her closer. "You followed them perfectly." Outside the window, the city hummed softly, cars passing, dogs barking, someone practicing the violin on another floor. But inside our little world, everything was still. Peace doesn't look like perfection. It looks like breathing without flinching, laughing without looking over your shoulder, waking up without the weight of someone else's mood on your chest. It looks like a child safe in your arms and a future you built with your own 2 hands. Before Emily fell asleep, she whispered one last thing. "You were right, Mommy. Family isn't who you're born to." I kissed the crown of her head. "It's who protects you." If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to Jessica's story. Where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to know where this story found you. And if you've ever had to walk away from someone to protect your peace, tell us how you chose yourself. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real-life stories that hit where it matters. And remember, sometimes the bravest thing you'll ever do is simply not go back.